this was the Wild West in the Northeast. So those rules applied or disapplied, or however you want to look at it. It was America beginning. And in that nature, people were dying in lots of creepy ways that I'm going to cite. So first of all, you guys all know, of course, that back then life expectancy was lower. Any kind of cut or scrape or cold or flu or whatever, or break that you would now remedy with just urgent care or the medicine cabinet back then could have meant immediate death or imminent death. Certain infections and things like cholera, you know you're just going to be wrapping up your affairs, so you just know you're going out. And one thing I didn't expect to read about was a huge percent, or large enough percentage of the death toll was euthanasia. So why euthanasia? Let's not talk about the how, because again, that's too unsavory. But why? So again, right off the boat, they're building, they're trading, they're excavating, right? And when it comes to excavation and building, even today, with whatever work safety regulations they have on any building on this planet, especially when they're above 10 stories, there's an incident rate and a casualty rate. People still get hurt and die even today. Behind us, this beautiful church wasn't originally part of the tour, but we make a left-hand turn here. So naturally, people were asking about it. So I decided to make it part of the tour. And here's the thing: 2 nicknames. The first one is, and this is a big Wikipedia one and everything, it's the House of Death, which is kind of on the nose because so many people here have died in so many creepy ways. And the Mark Twain House, commemorating its most famous resident. Now there is a plaque right there that says something about Mark Twain or his name if you're interested in taking a picture of it. Many people that live here and or someone that they know or whatever, lots of people that frequent this place or have been here, claim to see the ghost of Mark Twain walking up and down the stairwell, which is supposedly the most haunted portion of the home. Now, my understanding is this happens usually around this time of the year, it's spooky season, so they just sort of blow it off as somebody dressed up for some sort of costume party, whatever, you know, the mustache and the eyebrow. And ironically, he didn't die here, he died in Connecticut in April of 1910, and he was a notorious skeptic when it came to the afterlife. Now, most of the information about this place comes from a woman by the name of Jan Bryant Bartell. She's an actress who lived here in the 1960s. She published a couple of books about having this whole lifetime of psychic and paranormal experiences. According to her, while living here, she was in contact with 22 ghosts. Now, she said, so these are her words. She said some of them were malevolent and some of them were benign. I'll give you an example of each. The most malevolent one, she said, was there was an apparition of a gray cat that used to go between her legs. You know how cats do that salacious thing to you, especially if you're allergic to them? When this would happen to her in the night when she would get up to use the restroom. Now, she said that was, one of the more crazy ones. Now, one of the more benign ones, she said she used to see the ghost of a little boy. She thinks he was like 5 or 6, maybe at the oldest, 7 years old, playing in the hallway. And I'm sorry, I can't remember what he was playing, but it was something like jacks or blocks. It was an antiquated game of some sort. The point is, he wasn't on his Nintendo Switch or his Oculus or whatever. It was from a long time ago. In the early 1930s, when it was still a full home, it was a single home, excuse me. The people who owned it were obviously very wealthy. They were philanthropists of a sort, very generous to the community. They always had lots of events happening and people, visiting, etc. So at one point, there was this woman who was visiting with her daughter, and in the middle of the night, they got up to use the restroom, and they believe they saw the ghost of Mark Twain sitting in front of one of these 2 windows. He was in a dark cloak. The woman said that he smelled like booze and filth, and his face looked really, it was really sallow and pale, and basically thought he was drunk and sick. But to paraphrase the situation, because there's lots of people frequenting the house, she kept saying, how can we help you? What is your name? Is there something wrong? That kind of stuff, whatever you would say in that situation. And she said he kept replying in garbled tongue and going on, and all she could really gather is he kept repeating that his name was Clemens and he had a problem to settle. And since Samuel Clemens is Mark Twain's real name, that helped confirm to an entire culture of people who are interested in paranormal activity, especially when it is historical. A gentleman by the name of Joel Steinberg. Joel Steinberg was a very well-respected New York City lawyer. In what capacity does not matter. The point is that when he was very successful and when he moved in here, everything changed. He moved in here, he starts getting abusive with his family, neglectful with his work, his behavior's all erratic. And now I'm not saying this to be insensitive or funny, but it was 1987, which was the heart of the crack epidemic, so naturally people think he must be on drugs. And then it all came to a head one day when he beat his 6-year-old adopted daughter and left her inside the home. Now people heard what they heard, etc. They called the cops knocked the door down. They find this young girl beaten badly, deceased, lying next to her younger brother, who was alive, but he was neglected. He was just a toddler. He was Joel Steinberg's biological son, neglected, filthy, and strapped to a playpen. Let's just leave it at that. He survived. He was reunited with his mother. Now, Joel Steinberg went to jail. And here's the thing. Joel Steinberg got out of jail. I believe it was 2004, but we could always look it up or whatever. The point is he got out of jail. And the thing is, why did he get out? We looked up all the stipulations. Why would a guy murder his own daughter? Number one, he's not the only one that this has happened to. He showed no remorse for his child after all these years, nor did he understand why he did it. And he's like a complete different person. And he's not the only one. This place is, it's like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Now this is the Emma Lazarus house. The emblem right there says her name and has some things about her on it. I don't think you can see it because it's dark out. But Emma Lazarus, for those of you who may not remember or didn't learn or whatever, Emma Lazarus was a poet that was born, an American poet, born in the 1840s. She wrote a poem called The New Colossus. Now, if that doesn't ring any bells, most, if not all of you, certainly know a quote that was added to the Statue of Liberty in 1906. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And I'm going to say it, that is never such a warm, important phrase in time as now. Okay, now a woman wrote that, and I either forgot or didn't know, and she wrote that during a time of serious suppression, so it's a very big deal that she achieved that, among other things. Now, her father was a wealthy sugar refiner, so she was born into privilege. She was educated by private tutors, and by the age of 17, she was already a published poet and working her way into the upper echelons of the high society art scene. So in the 1990s, there was this newlywed couple from the Midwest. They moved into this basement apartment. And right away from the first day, and especially at night, they heard coughing, incessant hacking, especially all night long. And after like the first week or so, they couldn't sleep, so they're complaining to the owners. They're having problems at home. The owners are like, hands up, we don't know what it is. The young lady, she does some research on the house. It doesn't take much. And she puts two and two together, paranormally speaking. And then one night, her suspicions were confirmed when she wakes up to coughing again, but this time it was her own. And just like the ghost, she cannot stop. So she's coughing and coughing and coughing, and her husband, he starts patting her on the back and giving her water, whatever you do in that situation. And then she starts to cough up blood, profusely so. So he calls an ambulance. Before the ambulance can get here, she starts violently seizing. It's this whole terrible, almost epileptic kind of episode, and I have to stress, it's worse than, what's the movie we all know where the head spins?
Exorcist?
The Exorcist, yeah, it's much worse. Do you guys not know that movie? Where the head spins? The Exorcist. Okay, so my point is it's much worse than that because this is real. And so the ambulance gets here, they've got to strap her into a gurney, they get her outside, and as soon as they get her outside, that's when the whole thing just stops and she wakes up. Of course, they still took her to the hospital and she was very exhausted, etc. But it's notable that she showed no signs of severe blood loss and she was coughing up blood this whole time. So this is the Jefferson Market Library. It used to be the Jefferson Market Courthouse. Now originally it was erected in 1830s, and that goes for a lot of the older buildings, including that church we saw, 1830s, 1840s is when they were erected. And originally this was just that fire lookout, or that tower, which was a fire lookout. Now it's completely closed down. Nobody can go up there. It's not a tourist attraction. It's very dangerous. But let's cut to the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. They made additions to this building. This was never a church. My understanding is it looks like that for the simple reason that the architect normally designed 30s, 40s, 50s. This area became more of a nightlife district, an entertainment district, and even a red light district. And as a byproduct of that, this became home to the city's first night court. And you can imagine that was pretty wild. And as a byproduct of that, this became home to the city's women's prison. This beautiful building was a women's prison. That was very unsavory. And I'm going to tell you one thing that I hear often on the tours. They used to, this is what a lot of the people on the street and like people walking by, the older people, the old school people, when it was a prison, they used to light toilet paper on fire and throw it out the windows and stuff like this. So again, this is a very ugly scene. So they closed it down. They did a very serious renovation. They reopened it in 1967 as the library. That's been its function ever since. So what was happening here, especially in the 80s and early 90s, during the end of the use of the card catalog version of the Dewey Decimal System. Does everybody know the Dewey Decimal System? Did you actually have to use it? Yeah, so you can imagine, so that helps the story. Because what would happen is, same cards getting removed and replaced, same books coming up missing, dropping off of shelves and things, the kind of stuff that might aggravate a librarian, I suppose. Now, more intensely so, again, same era, around 80s and early 90s. I think I mentioned nobody can go to the tower. It's completely sealed off. So what people were seeing, many people would claim to see a figure or figures on the tower. Some people would claim to see a figure on the tower seemingly jump or fall, only to find nothing when they would come and look. And specifically, people kept saying they were seeing a woman in a blue dress who was waving frantically over the hanging tree. So you can Wikipedia this one. It's literally the Hangman's Elm / the hanging tree. Last official hanging, 1819 or 1820. Had the official decree that there was no more hangings. They didn't do it because, again, Wild West rules apply. So they just kept on hanging people. So you can't really see, but they had to cut off all the branches going up. It's only natural for people to ask if that was the branch, but no, if one of us jumped up and grabbed it, it ripped right off. The last official hanging was a woman by the name of Rose Butler. They called her Rose the Burner Butler. Now here's the thing, Rose Butler, she was an African-American woman, and she wasn't really a slave, but she was still in that unfortunate period where she was just living in service of someone, and she was accused of burning down, I guess you'd call it, her so-called master's home. And that gentleman told the Lynch community, and they beat and humiliated her before ultimately hanging her here. Hanging was not the worst thing to happen to her. Now here's the thing, this is why they made it the last official one, because everybody knew that this gentleman and Rose Butler, who was working in her, at service of her, were in a relationship. They were having an affair, and it was tumultuous, and it was falling apart. So they knew he was literally and figuratively using this as a platform to get rid of her. Now, perhaps she burned the house down, perhaps she did, but this was a lover's quarrel, and that was completely foul and unnecessary. This building was erected in 1901. Back then, it was the biggest building around. You can see it from uptown, downtown, from all over the city, across both rivers. And the owners, they promoted it to the business industry, to the garment district, the garment industry specifically, as having all these safety features, specifically and including fireproof rooms. But the thing about that is it was a complete falsehood. It was the antithesis. It was a work safety nightmare. So let me go through the list. There were no. You just got here? There were no. No, I'm just busting your chops. You don't have to explain yourself. So there were no sprinkler systems. All the escape stairwells were too narrow and steep and had no lighting. But that didn't matter for the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. They occupied the top 3 floors, the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor. And they had a thievery policy, so all of their escape doors were closed and locked. One man had the key, that was the foreman, and he would unlock and check the bags before the ladies would work. It was classic sweatshop conditions. All of these sewing machines together, people working elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, fabric strewn across all the ceilings, upwards of 500 employees on all 3 floors, all of them very young female humans, the ages of like tween 10 through 12, all the way up to mid-40s. Okay, so on March 25th, 1911, at the end of the workday, somebody flicked what was either an unextinguished cigarette or match into this waste bin that was wooden and filled with fabric. So those who didn't scatter immediately had to go up, out windows, down elevator shafts, or to the roof. But that didn't matter for the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory because one of those first people to scatter was the foreman with the key, so they were trapped. Now, I don't know his story, but whatever it is, it echoes terribly throughout eternity. So within minutes, there were literally 25,000 people gathered around because everybody could see it and no one had ever seen such a thing. They're literally trying to like build human ladders and catch people kind of thing. And a fire truck gets through, they bring out all the ladders only go to the 7th floor, that's 10 stories, and then they bring out the fire nets. Now just imagine all these very young, frightened young ladies, just girls, and end of the day, they weren't expecting this. They're literally bumping into each other, bodies were cracking all over the place. It's a very ugly scene. On this side, they had a fire escape. Now this thing was designed so poorly that it let off almost as tall as that street light. It was maybe a foot or two lower. So in any regular situation, if there was an emergency, you'd either have to hang drop and be crippled for life in some way or die anyway. Now in this situation, presumably, there's all these people waiting to catch them, but that never happened because by the time 20 young ladies got onto that scaffolding, it peeled right off and they crashed to their deaths. At the end of the day, there were 146 people dead. 99% of them were very young ladies. It was not 99, but 9% of them were very young ladies. There were people trying to save them as well. The owners were held accountable. This does not make it better, but they had to give cash rewards to all the families. And this was a huge kick and a spark to the work safety revolution, and it helped start the Women's Garment Union. Now, in terms of paranormal activity, this is the Arts and Science Building for NYU, and I read this, but I heard this from some of the people that have come on the tour, a couple of students. So what I've heard is on the 9th floor, one of the elevators opens up in front of a mirror. And basically, some people claim to see everything but their own reflections in this mirror. They claim like the doors will open, people think they see and or smell smoke. Some people think they see someone else besides themselves in the mirror. Some people think they see smoke in the mirror, or it looks like people are scattering. I also read that some people were saying it looked like it was a mirror that was melting, but I don't even know what that would look like, so whatever that means to you. Again, this happened March 25th, 1911, and again, just last year, on the anniversary, they decided to create a memorial. Better late than never. So, and it's very beautiful, even though it's very late. Let's go across the street and take a look at it. It's got names hollowed out in it, and if you step forward into this glass, you can look, they're upside down there, so that they shine into the glass here. You can't see them very well out here. It's meant for the daytime. And then if you look about all the terrible things that happened and the heroics that were involved, and people trying to save people,